When it comes to lightweight mice, Mouse and GWolves have continued to push the boundary of what's light over and over again. And really the biggest issue that's been the problem in making mice lighter and lighter is build quality. At least for Mouse. Whenever you think of build quality issues, we have seen some whenever it comes to GWolves mice, but whenever we see one iteration to the next, there is changes that are made to ensure that build quality gets better that we haven't been seeing from Mouse. So today I have not one, not two, but three different GWolves mice that we're going to be covering today. So let's get into it. Starting with the HTS Ultra Deluxe Edition, it's priced at $140 and comes in at a whopping 29 grams. The mouse doesn't have a coating or finish, which in any other case would be an issue, but instead GWolves opted to have the entire mouse covered in honeycomb. One, there's no need for a finish or coating, and two, at least whenever it comes to moisture and sweat, the closed honeycomb design offers more grip on the sides of the mouse, as well as offer an open honeycomb design on the mouse buttons to help have more airflow between your fingers and the mouse buttons. Technically, this mouse was built and intended to use grip tape, but I wanted to keep the experience as pure as possible straight out of the box. Personally, in using this without grip tape, it didn't take any time to get used to, but grabbing any other mice and coming back to the Ultra covered in honeycomb is just a different feeling. It's not bad, it's just different from what you're used to. Tape-wise, this mouse is incredibly comfortable for me. The groove on the left side is perfect for my thumb placement. The height of the mouse helps me have my pinky more towards the middle of the mouse, so whenever I put my hand down, I don't have any issues rubbing up against the pad because of the height of the mouse. And on top of that, whenever we talk about the mid hump, it really places the pressure right here. So I mean, whenever I'm holding the mouse, it's just a perfect size. Again, I have a really good thumb placement, I have good pinky placement, so it's just, this mouse is just really comfortable to use. Build quality is incredibly solid. Clicks have very minimal pre or post travel at all. Side buttons have very little movement at all either. And the shell and the PCB are solid. I mean, I have zero creaking, flexing, anything on this mouse whatsoever. Clicks are using Wano blue shell pink dot switches, which is a major upgrade to the old zippy switches that they were using before. Side buttons feel very nice and crisp, and the scroll wheel feels comfortable and notchy as well. The stock skates provided by GWolves are pretty fast and perform fairly well on cloth and glass. They don't feel very scratchy either, but I did replace the skates since I am testing so many different skates from different companies at the moment, and I'll have a video talking about those soon. Personally, I didn't have any issues with sensor implementation or battery life, but they did just release an update that boosts battery life by 30%, so even if I did have an issue, in typical GWolves fashion, there's an update to the battery life that makes it better. One thing I do want to touch on is the forward position sensor on the bottom of the mouse. In comparison to the other mice, the forward position sensor essentially allows for flicks to be faster and allows for more control since the cursor or reticle has a larger arch towards the top of the mouse than it does if it was centered. Moving on to the HTX Mini, it's priced at $160 and even lighter at 27 grams. Shape-wise, it's shorter than the original HTX. It's skinnier in width and has a slightly lower hump compared to the original. Personally, the original HTX size is more comfortable for me since it filled my hand a little more, with my pinky bone giving me more support that I don't get on the HTX Mini, and I definitely notice that it feels thinner in width. So, I mean, if I hold the mouse that I usually would, again, whenever I say my pinky bone, I'm getting support up to this point whenever I hold it, whereas on this, it doesn't have enough length to hit my pinky for extra support. It is shorter, it's not reaching that, so at least in terms of overall comfortability, this is more comfortable for me to use. I get a little bit more control and a little bit more support on the original HTX than I do the Mini. And I do, whenever I hold it, I can tell that I'm kind of squeezing in a little bit more than I would on the HTX. So I feel it is, I could tell that it's a little bit thinner compared to the original. However, For those who are looking for a smaller version of the original HTX, this is honestly an easy recommend. The Mini is using better switches than the original, better click implementation with less pre and post travel compared to the original, which, I mean, at least in terms of click implementation across the board for all three of these mice, this is very tight, it's very good, and the pre and post travel is extremely minimal. You also get better skates, you get a better sensor, you get better battery life out of the box compared to when the original HTX was released. The three main differences compared to the original, outside of the internals and the size, is the updated side button placement. It's a little bit more spaced out compared to the original. There's no DPI button on the top, and the mouse not relying on a finish or coating, but instead relying on the closed off honeycomb. I think the closed off honeycomb feels a little bit more comfortable than the open honeycomb on the HTS Ultra, but it's nothing that you would really notice in game. Now, if you go back to my original HTX video, I had the thumbnail as tiny and mighty, but that was before I used the HTR. So when we compare the original golf ball to the new golf ball, the original HTR came in at 26 grams. The Pro comes in at the most expensive at 170 at 24 grams. Shape-wise is mostly similar to the original with the exception of a shift and the side button placement in the rear of the mouse. GWolves changed the full hump in replace of a bottom lip piece where you get the extra weight reduction in place for the bottom skates. Build quality on this is surprisingly solid for the size with a bar across the bottom of the mouse to secure the PCB, and I have zero creaking or flexing whatsoever. The bottom bar for the PCB is just extremely well done. Quick implementation is solid as well. It's not as crisp as the HTX Mini or the Ultra, but it still has very minimal pre or post travel. Has a little bit more pre-travel than the other two, but again, it's still solid overall. I've had no issues with a battery life or sensor implementation, and ultimately in comparison to the original HTR, personally with the size of my thumb, the original HTR was a little bit more comfortable since I have a little bit more room with my thumb placement, but the HTR Pro shift and the side button placement makes it easier to use the side buttons than the original. And with a lot of people asking for side buttons on fingertip mice, I think it's gonna make the Pro a better option overall, since one, I have bigger hands, and two, I mean, for those that are looking for side buttons, this is ultimately gonna be more comfortable than the original. With that being said, I do have two things that I wanted to touch on really quick. Number one, whenever we talk about the overall price between the Ultra, the HTX Mini, and the HTR Pro, mentally I was looking at that and like, why are you getting a smaller mouse but it's more expensive? And ultimately, whenever I reached out to GWolves, they specifically said, look, the reason that it's like that is purely because of manufacturing. Manufacturing wise, the HTX Mini, I did not realize, but the HTX Mini has the lowest side button placement on the entirety of the market. So whenever you're trying to build something that is extremely hard to manufacture, it's gonna be more costly. And that's really the same as you get smaller with the mice that they offer. So I did want to share that with everybody, but two, I mean, ultimately, I feel like I covered everything. If you feel like there's anything that I missed, as always, feel free to throw them in the comment section down below. And I will catch you all next time. Start a riot.